Hey, this is David Gill, the Performance Lab Director with Vert. We have another edition of Vert Athlete today, and this one's pretty unique. I have Jackie and Maggie Scott joining me today. Hello,
Hey,
ladies.
David.
Hi, David.
Hi, everyone.
So the assistant coaches, Jackie's at Villanova, Maggie's at Ole Miss, and what's really unique about this now is, Vert's been around in volleyball for quite some time. So we're starting to have a lot of coaches who utilize the technology as players and are now utilizing technology and data with their athletes. So before we kick off, we're gonna talk about that, how you communicate the data with your athletes, but give us a little background on kind of your playing days.
Yeah, I'll start. I went to Western Kentucky, played there for 2 seasons where I was primarily like a DS. They didn't use Vert, and then I went to SIUE and I was an attacker there. And we had Vert units, but they were older and just like not consistently used. Like I don't think we actually bought or had the budgeting to buy the full program and everything like that. So my experience with them as a player was like limited. Like I knew what they were, but like we didn't consistently use them.
Yeah. And then I played at Oregon all 4 years, so from 2014, and then my last season was 2017. I'm pretty sure we talked about that we used Vert units for 3 of the 4 years. I could be wrong. We might have used it my freshman year, but as a freshman, you're not even thinking about that. So we definitely used them my last 3 years. And so I had experience with them as a player. Like we used them every single practice. The iPad was sitting out. Our athletic trainer was like the lead point for it. And then we had a sports science department also that worked with her to kind of analyze the data along with you. So it's definitely different, our 2 experiences, obviously. And it's different too, like from me, like they just had the iPad sitting out, like we got to see it if we wanted to. And they would kind of talk with us a little bit about the data. Obviously it takes time to kind of accumulate and actually get legitimate stuff of like, hey, this player needs this is what her workload is, this is where she's best. So once we got that, we would talk a little bit more about it. I think me being a setter, personally, I wasn't as into the numbers. So I'd have 300, 400 jumps, and they would just all be sub-maximal anyway. Compared to like the hitters and the middles were much more like, ooh, what was my jump number today? Like what I have. And so it was interesting too, like position-wise, like how much I really was interested in it and how much I really like, I would say like focused on it. But that was kind of my experience with it as a player.
Yeah, cool. So I will start this off too and say, because we're going to be talking about how you would have, both of you almost wished you had more data as an athlete, but you're also both exercise science backgrounds. So
yeah.
We did actually a webinar a couple of days ago at the AVCA talking about athlete profiles.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really important part of this, right?
Yeah.
In terms of,
yeah.
And we'll kind of get right into that now. And I guess we'll start with Jackie again, because at both programs, you're utilizing the Vert team system. How now as a coach do you go about looking at it, and then just as importantly, communicating that with the athletes?
Yeah, so you and I have talked about like we totally overuse our bodies as athletes. Like I can't even believe the amount of work I used to do. Like I'm just like, you were an insane person. What were you doing? So if I would have had like direct jump numbers to be like, hey, when you did like a full 2-hour workout and then went to practice, look at your jump numbers. They were really bad. Or like the weeks,
they were just worse.
Yeah, or like the weeks where I was like, oh, big game, gonna tone it down this week. And I would maybe work out once extra or something during the week and be like, oh, your jump numbers look better. Wow, the correlation.
Hey.
And just where I could have really understood my workload a little bit better. I think the jump numbers are just such an easy way when you can see like that upward swing or that downward swing. Like it's really easy for an athlete to go, oh, okay, like I'm taking care of my body. And for some athletes, maybe that's like the sleep, like for me, it was overworking out. But for some athletes, maybe it's the sleep component of like, oh, look, I was getting really good night's sleep. Oh, this is midterms week. Like, look at how my numbers were affected, or any other things that are going outside of their performance too, that they're doing, that they can kind of see that direct impact on their jump numbers. And also obviously from like a load standpoint, it's helpful for us. Like this was our first season, like me as a coach using it. And I had some slip ups, like forgetting a router, obviously, hinders yourself in the season when you forget that on a road trip. Doesn't do myself any favors. But I think now that we have that data, like I've had the time now since I've been home to really look at it and be like, okay, like how did this impact us? And we're each talking, like it's going to be load management is going to be just insanely important, obviously, stepping into this fall season with the summer we've had, and like we're worried about, you know, the swing component, the jump component. Like there's just so many things to really that we've taken into account. So using it this fall, I think, is going to be more important than probably any season that it's been around. So
really good point. And just kind of jumping off that, obviously my experience, like I said, as a player, I was definitely with Jackie where I was like, oh, like the more reps the better. Like I would stay after practice and like just serve a bunch or set a bunch. And obviously that was partly like the psychological component of just like how my brain is wired. It's like I need these reps. And I still don't know if like having vert numbers would have changed that. Can't say. I do think if I would have understood it a little bit better and just looked more at my like holistic performance, I definitely would have made different decisions and done things differently. And again, you see the individual days as players and you know, like, okay, this is my max. This is my like, this is really what I'm trying to hit. Like you have those numbers in your brain, but besides that, like you don't see that graph. You don't see that kind of like gradual of this until like for us, it was like after the season where they're like, hey, this is where you were at. And I was like, oh, there's that horrible dip in performance. Remember that like horrible slump I had? Oh, there it is. And so to like see that after everything happened, and again to see it throughout my 3 years of playing was interesting. Like I didn't have any injuries, so I got to see every practice, every match, and all that stuff's there for me. So that was me as a player. And again, as a setter, it's different. You're not attacking. I was in a 6-2 half the time, so half the time I wasn't a front court player. I think now as a coach, it's interesting. It's not so black and white too, of like, oh, here's our acute to chronic workload ratio. We're just going to put them right here. These are the drills we're going to do. And you think like science, you're like, oh, it's so easy. Just snap your fingers. I'll just play in a practice. And it's just not like that. There's so many components that go into it. So while you have that feedback as a coach, and we're really lucky, the strength coach we have at Ole Miss is awesome at what he does. Like he brings us a printout every day of like, hey, here were their numbers. Here's who's a little low. And unfortunately this spring we didn't get to use that to obviously its full capacity. We just kind of got a little touch of it once we got into 20 hours. But again, you have that science there and you're like, oh, this feedback is so good. And then you're like, okay, but using this feedback is more than just like the science of it. It's really like an art of using that feedback and figuring out each player, figuring out, hey, how many reps does this player need? And like incorporating that psychological component. So there is so much to it. But I think for me as a coach, like I try my best to keep those numbers in the back of my head and just like keep my players safe. And like Jackie said, coming into this fall, it's going to be especially important to do our best of looking at those and making sure that the girls are going to stay healthy and be able to like ease into season.
Yeah, and that's what we always say, right? It's a guide. You've programs that oftentimes take the numbers incredibly literally, and they're like, oh, it says stop at 150. It's like, well, you know, you'll be okay if you go to 160 today. It's like it's that constant balance between, you know your athlete, like this athlete needs those reps, versus this athlete's a junior or senior and her landings are starting to go higher and higher, but she doesn't need the reps as badly. So yeah, we're gonna taper her down. One thing that a lot of coaches have brought up too is, you know, there are those occasions where they are stopping an athlete sooner than the athlete wants,
yes.
Right? Because the athletes can go for forever. And so I know that can sometimes be a communications challenge, until ideally they see the results. Like, hey, you were jumping higher at the end of the season versus lower. But
and I can definitely speak on that. Just this past year when I was at LaSalle before Ole Miss, it was their first year using VERTs, like the first year that they did any sort of like quantifiable data. And our girls really appreciated it just from the point of like, they felt like they were being taken care of. Like, they're like, you guys are looking after our bodies
like
in a way.
You guys invested in them.
Yeah, like we were investing in them, and we were making sure that like, hey, like, how are you guys feeling today? Like, these are kind of our jump numbers. And there was something for them to look at of like, hey, like, I feel okay, or like, hey, I don't feel good today, and like, here's my jump number. I had a senior who was like, first of all, incredibly smart young lady. And she loved the data, like, period. But she had struggled with jumper's knee really bad the previous 3 seasons. This year we did our very best to manage her load and keep her jump numbers lower. And this was the first season, magically, that she didn't have jumper's knee. So she was one kid that like really stuck out of, hey, I like having the data, and B, really actually showing like yielding the results you want to see from using this sort of equipment. So that was definitely like cool for us. And she, because of how we used it, she had more respect for us as coaches. So not only was her performance better, but like our relationship was significantly better because of it.
That's awesome. Those are my favorite kind of stories.
Yeah.
Obviously,
we had a setter who's a senior. She has terrible shin splint issues and just kind of like a variety of different stuff. And this was the first season where she's actually been able to like make it through the whole season in terms of not having to take like a weekend where she has to take off or anything like that. And I think we were more aggressive managing her numbers, but it was also a lot easier to manage her workload when we had the data kind of present of like, hey, she's on a 30 jump practice, like aggressively low jump practices. 30 no jump, like aggressively low ones where it was like easy to be like, all right, you're actually like, our trainer could visually see, hey, Emma's on no jump the rest of practice, or and all of those kind of managing of her kind of stuff made that a little bit easier for us, for sure.
Yeah, and those are the tangible things, and those are the good things where not that we want to have those chronically injured athletes, but those are some of the only times where you almost have proof that it's working on the injury mitigation part. Because the other players who are like, I feel good, I'm doing well, I wish I was jumping more, they're not getting hurt, and there's a number of reasons why, but a big reason might be the fact that your coaches have limited you. Like, you want to make sure that you get up, we're hitting match levels in practice, but we build to that. And to your point, this fall it will be more important. We're, for us as a business, right, you're thinking like, oh man, budgets are all frozen and this is crazy. We're doing a million calls like this, but we've had a couple programs. I just thought this was super fascinating that were, even in a frozen budget, we're able to put this as essential because it had such an injury history. Like, we really need to use the basics, looking at the jumps and landings to bring our athletes back in safely and healthy.
It totally makes sense. And I think too, from my perspective now, as someone who no longer has that capacity to jump, like I used to be able to, like I said, jump 300, 400 times a practice. It was fine. This spring I went to do just like a little lift with the team, just for fun. And like I said, our strength coach loved him to death. He had this crazy jump series, and it's just a bunch of bunny hops, different. The whole thing doesn't matter, but it was probably like 10 minutes tops what it took. You're not even jumping the whole time. I walked out of that probably 15 minutes later. My calves were already like they were rocks.
We both had the same exact experience, and like, so mine happened when she was still in Philly. Hers happened like when she was at Ole Miss. They were doing like these extensive hop drills, and our team really liked them. And I love our strength coach. And I was working out with one of our senior athletes that's going to go on and play beach. And she wanted someone to work out with her and asked me if I would. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah. We did like these like one extensive hops, and literally the next day I went to get out of bed and I like basically tripped because my calves were so sore. Yeah, like, and Maggie was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, dude, I did hops yesterday, my calves.
I made fun of her, and then 2 weeks later it happened to me. But that situation for me just again proved back to the point of like actually how physically demanding our sport is, and how much load we can put on our players. And like I said, that was 10 minutes of me jumping in. I would play every once in a while in the spring, and I'm just like, it is so demanding, and you don't realize it when you're playing consistently every day. You're so used to it. Like your body becomes accustomed to it, and then you take that load off just for a second and trying to build that back up. It's gonna, like you said, it's extremely important, and those experiences, while not enjoyable, definitely gave us some hindsight bias to how important it is to make sure we ease our players into it. And
because you're looking at in that particular scenario too, you're going to have some that Achilles tendon stiffness, and that stiffness was lacking before because those are the particular kinds of movements now. And I actually think I know almost exactly what you did with Chaz, but the
good old Chaz.
But those movements now are what are so important because they're not, again, it's not like high impact. It's like it's bunny hops. It's high volume, low impact plyos, but those tendons, and again, those tendons and ligaments are the big concern right now because the muscles, you can get back to jumping almost as high as you were after probably honestly a week or two of training. Your muscles come back quickly, but it's the tendon that lags behind in that capacity development. And that's actually a comically perfect example of it.
You're welcome, everyone, for providing that. And that's the thing too. Like, you look at all the tendinopathy in volleyball and how common that. I think it's the most common injury besides like sprains. It might actually be more common. You would know better than I.
Well, yeah, it's just they tend to break it up. You have tendinopathy is the most common overuse injury, be it, I think, primarily in the knee, followed shortly by the shoulder. Like, they kind of battle each other. Again, there's a direct correlation there, though. You're jumping, you're oftentimes swinging. And then, yeah, we kind of separate the whole, I landed on somebody else's foot, because we haven't figured out a way to help with that yet.
Let us know when you do. We'll buy you.
That'd be cool.
But nonetheless, yeah, like that bunny hop series was just like,
well, it's like we were both, it's not like we were just sitting on our butts.
Yeah,
it's
not like we're out of shape.
Like lift, workout, all of that. And then I just did 10 minutes, and like where it's like, obviously we all hope as coaches our athletes are following the body weight strength program our coaches are providing, but it's like, I can only provide so much for them. Like,
yeah. And just that volume of that specific movement is so taxing. And looking at, like you said, trying to mimic that and trying to get our athletes back to the volume they need to be at is just going to be crucial. Excited to get back to it whenever that does happen. But again, really happy with all that you guys are doing, and going to help us make sure the fall is as injury-free as possible.
You know it. Well, awesome. And thanks again for hopping on, doing the quick call, kind of educating kind of such a unique perspective of the coaches now who, again, we're familiar with it partially as players. It'd be fun to go back as players now, because you'd be sitting there.
We'd do it so differently. David.
I would be so much better. Like, my coaches would enjoy me like just 10 times fold more.
Also same. Yeah, I don't think I would have liked coaching myself, but that's a totally different discussion.
We'll do another call on that. What it would have been like to coach yourself.
Yeah. You can tag in my coaches and see what they think.
All right. Well, so this has been another edition of Vert Athlete. Again, right now you can go onto myvert.com. You can schedule video calls with myself and members of our performance staff. We're doing a lot of calls like this. Now is just the time to educate, learn, and improve in ways that we couldn't previously invest as much time in. So again, ladies, thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thanks,
we'll talk soon.
David. Appreciate it.